I just wanted to make this recording. My niece deserves this recording. She passed away on September the 21st of 22, and she was born on July 31st, 1959. And recently, my son had passed away on August 21st, exactly 1 month to the day that my niece passed away. And in both cases, I wound up getting calls from, or being contacted by the police in both events. In my son's case, the police knocked on my door at 9:30 on a Sunday night and informed me that the Atlantic City police had called them that my son passed away. And still to be determined exactly what the causes were. You have to wait a few months for a police report. With my niece, she was going to attend my son's funeral. And she was going to fly out to see her birth mother in New York a couple of days, the day she died. And it was her birth mother's 80th birthday. And apparently her death day was the same as the mother's birthday. Her mother was going to be 80 years old. And then she was going to fly back to Florida, where she lived, either in Orlando, Winter Park, whatever, and then fly out with her husband to the Philadelphia airport to meet me, to see me the night before the funeral, and she was going to drive to Allentown, Pennsylvania, to my son's funeral, and I was going to drive from my home with a neighbor who was kind enough to drive me, and we were going to meet at the funeral. But on the way to New York to see her birth mother, she passed away, and she had called me from the plane, and then my wife got on the phone, and all of a sudden, the phone went dead, and a couple hours later, a detective from New York called me and said, "Do I know Lori Landcorn?" I said, "Yeah, that's my niece." And they said, "Well, we noticed that she called you. It was the last call, and or whatever." And they said she got sick on the plane, and does she have relatives? And I said, "Yeah, she has two sons and a husband, a sister. Do you know their phone numbers?" "No, I don't." So I gave him the name. Her sister is Cindy, her husband is Mike, one son is Eric, one son is Jason, and apparently they went through her phone, and then 2 hours later her sister Cindy called me that she had passed away on the airplane. And last night, today's the 27th, so it was the night of the 26th of September, her friend Sherry, who's a lifetime friend, they've known each other since a child, told me that she had an aneurysm on the plane. But to just go back in history, she was my my sister Sandy was 10 years older than me, adopted her, and she was an adopted child, and she was always a very kind person. I remember when she was 7 and I was 20 years old, I used to have her put little coins in these folders. I was a coin collector, and she was a very emotional girl. My family had a tendency to talk about people when they weren't there, and she would really get upset, almost feel like crying. "Why are they talking about so-and-so?" But that was a habit that they had. But my family was a little on the rough side. That's the way it was. And she had this compassion, extreme compassion, and for people all her life. And that's what made her shine to other people in the world. She would develop friendships, and like Sherry, lifetime friendship, and she would have compassion for people that weren't being treated right or being abused, and she really cared about people. And on the other hand, she had this righteous indignation. She would stick up for you. She would fight for you if she felt that somebody was being abused or mistreated. So she had this kind streak, and people have certain strengths that other people don't understand, and she had the strength of compassion and righteous indignation, sticking up for anybody that wasn't treated right. And she was my best friend, along with my son who had just passed. And she was to come to his funeral, and apparently everything's up in the air. Her body was in New York, and this is what Sherry, your friend, said, Levinson, or maybe I'm not pronouncing her name right, but and you know, Sherry was a lifetime friend. They went to school like in the seventh grade or something. They've been friends all these years, and apparently her body's, and they're trying to get her body out of New York, and anyway, I would probably have trouble attending. I have to take care of my wife, who can't be left alone, really. You know, it was hard enough leaving her alone for a day to go to my son's funeral. But Lori I'll always miss her. She was a kind person. And when she cared for you, she was the greatest advocate for you in the world. She would help you. She would do anything. In my case, she was going to fly from Florida to Philly and meet me and drive to the funeral, and renting rooms and renting cars and caring about you. And she was going to sit with me, and her cousin Debbie, which she found through a DNA test through her son, was a relative, and she lived around that area, and she stood in for Lori at the funeral and sat with me. And she, too, was a very kind person. And, you know, you can't take kindness for granted. You can't take people that have righteous indignation for granted. You can't take people that care about other people for granted, because in this society it's sometimes hard to find. And I'll always miss Lori. I'll always miss my son, my two best friends. And they both left within 1 month, both on the 21st of August and the 21st of September. And I can imagine the sadness of Lori's birth mother to find out that instead of visiting her, that she passed away. Her son Jason, who flew in at the same time Lori did in the same airport, 15 minutes apart, I guess had to tell the mother, the birth mother, that Lori had passed. And I don't think that was such an easy job. She expected a visit, instead she got bad news. And I just wish everybody well. And to Lori and my son David, I guess they're looking down at us and appreciating any kind words that they get from somebody. But I just wanted to tell this story. I got 2 calls from police that 2 people were gone or whatever within a month, and 1 month apart they passed, and I'll always love them.